By 1200 BC, Egypt was already ancient, with the Great Pyramids of Giza standing for over 1300 years. This civilization measured its history in millennia, not centuries. Pharaohs and dynasties had come and gone, yet Egypt endured. The Nile River's predictable floods nourished the soil, creating a culture that believed in order or ma'at. The great temples at Karnak and Luxor were sprawling cities of worship. Pharaohs like Ramesses II covered the land in monuments to their glory and the gods. Egypt was a superpower, confident in its strength and history. Their art, religion, and politics reinforced the idea of an unchanging cycle. The pharaoh was the living embodiment of the god Horus, destined to maintain order. Egypt had faced threats before, but always emerged stronger. However, the world outside was changing. The pharaohs were part of a complex, interconnected world. They corresponded with other great kings, traded goods, and married foreign princesses. Egypt's stability depended on the Nile, its armies, and the stability of its neighbors. As the 13th century BC closed, that stability began to crumble. The Late Bronze Age was an era of unprecedented international connection. Great kingdoms like Egypt, the Hittite Empire, Mycenaean Greece, and Babylonia formed a great powers club. These states were linked by trade and diplomacy, exchanging lavish gifts and forming alliances. Ships crisscrossed the Mediterranean, carrying goods from one end of the world to the other. This was a globalized economy for its time. The interconnected world depended on stability and prosperity. The Amarna letters reveal a world of political maneuvering and royal marriages. This system was fragile, relying on each part of the network remaining stable. A crisis in one region could quickly spread, threatening the entire system. The Hittites needed grain, the Mycenaeans needed metals, and Egypt needed wood. For a long time, this interdependence created peace and prosperity. But as the 13th century BC wore on, the links began to strain. The entire system was at risk of falling apart. Trouble appeared as a series of growing problems across the ancient world. The Hittite Empire faced a severe famine, threatening its survival. Climate change led to crop failures, and a hungry population grew restless. In the Aegean, the Mycenaean Greeks' palaces began to burn. Widespread destruction across Greece led to the collapse of Mycenaean society. Even in Egypt, there were signs of internal stress. During Ramesses III's reign, workers went on strike due to delayed grain rations. The state struggled to meet its obligations, a sign of a system-wide crisis. These events were connected, part of a domino effect rippling across the world. Famine meant grain ships stopped sailing, and the collapse of a kingdom meant a trading partner disappeared. Pirates preyed on once secure shipping lanes, trust eroded, and people became desperate. Out of this chaos, a new threat emerged: the Sea Peoples. The Sea Peoples were a loose confederation of groups on the move. They were migrants, refugees, and warriors driven by famine, war, or disaster. They traveled with families, fighting for new land to settle. Egyptian art shows them as diverse, with horned helmets and feathered headdresses. They fought as infantry, using long swords and round shields. Their goal was to find new land, not just raid and plunder. They moved through Anatolia, destroying the Hittite Empire. They burned ancient cities like Ugarit to the ground. The Sea Peoples were a nightmare for the great kingdoms. They did not follow established rules of warfare or diplomacy. They were a force of nature, a human storm born from the collapse of civilization. After destroying the Hittites, they set their sights on Egypt. The final bastion of the Old World faced its greatest test. Ramesses III prepared for the invasion. Egypt was the last target in a world engulfed by chaos. Pharaoh Ramesses III knew Egypt was the final target. He heard of the Hittite Empire's destruction and Ugarit's ruin. This was an existential threat, a fight for Egypt's survival. Ramesses organized a massive defensive effort, fortifying borders and conscripting an army. He mobilized Egypt's navy, preparing for total war. His strategy was to stop the Sea People's land advance and confront their fleet. The Egyptian army halted the advance in southern Canaan. The Sea People's fleet sailed for the Nile, the gateway to Egypt. Ramesses commemorated his efforts at Medinet Habu. The reliefs depict the enemy, preparations for war, and brutal combat. They show the pharaoh as the heroic savior of his nation. Egypt was ready for the decisive confrontation. The decisive confrontation came at the Nile's mouth. The Sea People's fleet sailed confidently towards the delta. Ramesses laid a brilliant trap, using the Nile Delta's maze to his advantage. The Egyptian fleet waited in a pre-arranged kill zone. It was a brutal, close-quarters fight in the river's confines. Egyptian ships designed for river combat closed in on the enemy. Archers unleashed a hail of arrows, creating chaos. Egyptian marines boarded enemy ships, fighting hand-to-hand. The Sea People's warriors were overwhelmed, their ships capsized. It was a complete victory for the Egyptians. The Sea People's naval invasion was crushed. Ramesses celebrated this monumental achievement. The carvings at Medinet Habu depict the pharaoh's divine leadership. Egypt had survived, standing firm against the tide of chaos. The Sea Peoples were a coalition of desperate tribes. The Peliset, shown with feathered headdresses, became known as the Philistines. The Checker settled on the Levantine coast, becoming part of the new political landscape. Other groups like the Shurden, Shekelesh and Luka had mysterious origins. These names make the Sea Peoples real, not a faceless horde. Their alliance was one of convenience and desperation. They shattered old empires, clearing the way for new peoples and kingdoms. Egypt's victory was remarkable but lonely. The interconnected system of the Late Bronze Age was destroyed. The Hittite Empire vanished. Mycenaean palaces were ruins and trading cities were ash. The Sea Peoples were a symptom of the crisis, not its sole cause. Climate change, famine and earthquakes created a system on the verge of collapse. The Sea People's arrival was a final blow to a crumbling structure. The complex world of the Late Bronze Age gave way to the fragmented Iron Age. Egypt survived the storm but soon entered a long period of decline. Ramesses III saved Egypt, but not the world he knew. The Bronze Age ended and the Iron Age began. The Sea Peoples ended an entire era of history. Their origins remain a mystery, a shadowy group that changed the world. This story of collapse fascinates us today as a cautionary tale. The Late Bronze Age was a globalized world like our own. A combination of factors led to a rapid and catastrophic collapse. The parallels to our modern world are hard to ignore. The story of 1177 BC reminds us that civilizations can fall. It shows how a perfect storm can overwhelm powerful societies. By studying the ancient world's unraveling, we can learn valuable lessons. The mystery of the Sea Peoples is a mirror forcing us to consider our own vulnerabilities.